It is Thursday, the 6th of April, 2017. Again. And you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast where Mike, 2 episodes running, forgets to switch the recorder on.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I've been working a lot.
Have you considered just having it recording at all times and you have to actively stop it? It's like the fail-safe in modern nuclear power plants.
Yes.
Is that you have it so that it's if you don't keep doing a thing, it stops. You need the opposite kind of thing going on with the recording, that it will record unless you tell it not to.
It needs to record like a Samsung television.
Exactly, just like a Samsung television.
My entire life, just in case... I need to. I had some positive feedback on that bit we did on the listening devices from people who work at some of the companies mentioned. Saying,
well, I'm glad that
more or less that's what we described was right. Which
yeah,
is
I'm
good,
glad that episode garnered some positive feedback. I'm glad that there was some sort of positive feedback on something that happened during that show.
So we did about 2 minutes at the top of the show of hilarious
fucking gold.
It was fucking
absolute
brilliant
gold
material. There were impressions of Jeremy Clarkson.
There were. That's genuinely true.
We insulted Andy Wilson.
We did.
It was magnificent. All of that.
We insulted Andy Wilson. Listener feedback.
We did talk about listener feedback, and we, all of that is lost to the ether now.
And as we talked about Andy Wilson, we insulted Andy Wilson without referencing his Filipino paedophile ring that gets constantly brought up whenever Andy Wilson's name is mentioned in America.
What are you talking about?
You don't listen to American podcasts.
No.
So on Scathing Atheist and God Awful Movies, and I think occasionally some of Thomas Smith's podcasts now, whenever they mention Andy Wilson, they talk about the fact that he imports Filipino children into sex slavery.
Why?
It's kind of just grown up out of nowhere. But literally every single time. But now it's not. It's got started going the other way. So it's not just whenever they mention Andy, they bring up the fact that he's involved in sex trafficking.
Right. You say the fact.
The fact. The absolute cast out fact.
Alternative fact.
But now it's whenever they mention something related to paedophilia or sex trafficking, they bring up Andy Wilson.
Jesus Christ, how does Andy feel about this?
I don't think they've checked, but I think he's all right. I think it's fine. Actually, on cognitive dissonance as well, it's spread to... It's like the Andy Wilson is a criminal mastermind of a horrendous sex trafficking ring has spread now across multiple different tracks of podcasts in America.
Well, I'll look forward to it showing up on Skeptics Guide eventually. That'd be interesting place to have that conversation.
That is true. That is true.
What you guys been doing?
I had a weekend off last weekend.
Good Lord.
I didn't do any work for an entire week. That's not true.
No.
I did work on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. I can't back that up.
But I left work early on Friday, so I think that counts. I went up to Morecambe for the weekend to see Warren's family, which was lovely because we had nice weather. We took the dogs out. We took our dog Lupin up with us, who, as we've mentioned before on the show, is a dickhead. We took him to spend the weekend at theirs, and they have this really lovely, really old Labrador called Nina. And they recently lost their other really old Labrador called Simone. So they had Nina and Simone, which was good names for a pair of Labradors. So we went and spent the weekend there. We did some walking outside. We took Lupin. Lupin had the best time in the world ever. He was so excited. And utterly exhausted, so much that we got home at about 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, and he slept for the rest of the day. He slept through his tea time. He slept through food. When I went to bed, he just followed me through and fell immediately straight to sleep on the bed. He was utterly, utterly broken. But I did work in the afternoon. I finally recompiled my final thesis.
Nice.
And uploaded it to the university repository. So I have now done everything I need to do for my thesis.
Good.
And can graduate in July, which is good.
Marvellous.
So that's one thing I've been doing. The other thing I've been doing today, as a recording today is a Monday, my very, very close friend from university who started her PhD with me also submitted her thesis today.
Nice.
So we have spent the afternoon drinking wine.
So you're half cut.
So you're half cut.
I've had about just over half a bottle of wine this afternoon, so that might explain why I'm a little bit chattier than normal.
We're in for an entertaining show, I feel.
That's fine. If you're chattier than normal in a way that is entertaining and more engaging for listeners, we might need to keep you half cut at all times. In exactly the same way that we now purposely keep me sober for all episodes, for exactly the same reasons, essentially.
I've been playing Zelda Breath of the Wild. The new Zelda game.
I've never played a Zelda game.
I really enjoy Zelda
Never
games.
do we did Nintendo.
Except I hate this one. Oh no. Which is weird,
but everyone's loving it.
Everyone's loving it.
Why are you still playing it if you hate it?
Well, I might be wrong. Skeptic, innit?
Yeah.
So,
but even if
completist,
you're wrong,
weird or
life's
completist.
too short to do stuff you don't enjoy.
Life's ages.
I mean, and it's true. I've got a long I haven't. My fucking heart.
There's too many good, but there's too many good things to do. Go
Like
and do
what?
more fun things.
Name
like
5.
things you actually like.
Name 5.
Read interesting books that you enjoy.
He wouldn't do that. He'd read them on a Kindle, maybe.
Like
Like what?
Doctor Who.
No, stuff Mike likes.
Rewatch
Doctor Who.
episodes of Doctor Who.
Well-
Rewatch episodes of fucking Chalk. Rewatch
What's wrong
weird
with Chalk?
other weird 80s, 90s. Rewatch the British Empire,
Right,
apart from the ones you
right.
can't get because they deleted them.
Write a book about the placebo effect.
He doesn't like doing that. He's made that abundantly clear in every private conversation we've had about it, where we're trying to bully him into writing what he's researching into a book.
But I bought the Zelda game, or rather, Katie bought me the Zelda game specifically to stop this cycle of
Just watching the same thing over and over again.
Up work, home, sleep, up work, home, sleep. She said, "Here you go. Here's a Zelda game. You love Zelda games, so you can do and play this a couple hours in the evening to relax." And I've been trying it, and I've been playing it for a bit, and kind of actually, I think I don't like this because they've quite significantly changed the game mechanic from previous Zelda games. So now it's more like cartoon Skyrim.
Oh, okay. Did you like Skyrim?
I mean, I did enjoy Skyrim.
Skyrim was all right.
But the world in Skyrim gets more powerful as you get more powerful. So enemies are always kind of just about as tough to beat.
Yeah.
Because they level up when you level up. But in Zelda, you go to the wrong bit of the map. There's quests that you find that you're just not capable of doing because you're not at that stage in the game. So there still is a kind of path you have to follow through the game for it to be able to work. And if you deviate from the path, then it doesn't really work out very well.
That was sort of true with Elder Scrolls Morrowind, where I'd be like, oh, there's a cave here. Anyway, I reloaded the game after I got my ass instantly handed to me by some ghost or other.
I stopped Zelda and I deleted it, and I went back to the beginning and playing it through again. I'm enjoying it more second time round, so I'll probably never mention that again.
Good.
Because listeners have pointed out that we say things, we'll give updates on that in the future. No,
we never do.
We never do.
We never ever do.
We never do. It's like, I'm not going to give any updates on what's been happening with homeopathy. Lots has been happening with homeopathy. Lots.
Unless it's about my thesis.
Yes.
I
We
give
do
lots
give
of
updates on that.
about
That's true. That is true.
I never shut up about that.
We should have one show where we just go through and give updates on everything we've ever said. We'll do that in the future, listeners. We'll have that episode where we give updates on everything.
Because we won't know when we mentioned it, because our show notes are terrible.
Mike's show notes are terrible because Mike doesn't want to be considered an authority on anything, which is why he won't write a book on the placebo effect.
That's true.
I've been to Berlin since the last episode, because the last episode was recorded just when I was in Berlin. Berlin, nice place, good place. Yeah, fucking cold.
Berlin,
fucking cold.
You
I don't know.
in the winter though.
Well, I didn't go in the winter.
It was the winter.
I went a week and a half ago.
Oh, you mean the weather, not the people?
No, the people were fine-ish, I think. They were very, very good. They were cool, not cold.
Right.
It was fucking hipster. We stayed in the most hipster place. I can't remember the name. It was like the Mitchell Burger Hotel. And we went in, all the music was, there's music playing in the background of the hotel all the time. It's always like Portishead or Bowie or Dylan. It was like, this is pretty good, actually. Even like 9 o'clock in the morning over breakfast, they're playing like really great music. Oh, this is pretty cool. It was kind of, there was like 6 different types of like vegan porridge available at breakfast, or like some sort of vegan kind of yogurts and stuff at breakfast. I mean, there was other stuff as well. Everywhere had, the logo for it was this red monkey with like blue bits on.
Okay.
And that was everywhere. It was also on these things that were like cans that were like 600ml cans.
Okay.
And I had no idea what they were.
It's a big can.
It's a big can. I was I don't know, I'm kind of interested in them. They were just there on the breakfast counter, just a can.
Yeah.
Oh, I kind of want to find them. And it was coconut water.
Oh.
Like revitalising coconut water.
It's very fashionable at the minute, coconut water.
Well, that's why it was in this hipster hotel that we were staying in. But, I mean, the place was so hipster, and it was cool. It was a really nice place. But the bedroom we had, the bed was, like, on a second floor within the room.
Okay.
Like, bunk beds for a double. And on the wall, there were Polaroids of just some random people from the 70s. So, like, just some 70s Polaroids they found.
Okay.
All the corridors, the lights were dimmed to a point where you couldn't see hardly anything. All the walls and floor was the same brown. So it just looked like, and it was built in a square, so it was an endless corridor of brown, at the end of which, at the end of every corridor was a TV screen on a 24/7 loop playing The Big Lebowski.
What?
Yeah. So that was a bit...
This hotel is ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. Yeah, it was ridiculous. But it was a cool place. It was a nice place. And Berlin, it was nice, Berlin. The only thing about Berlin, first of all, Berlin, I've never seen so many people drinking on the streets. Just wandering around the streets at all times with bottles of beer.
Yeah.
Like 11 in the morning, 3 people on the train there, they've all got beers. I don't know what it is about Berlin, whether it's kind of... I know East Berlin, reading the kind of history while we were there, and East kind of Germany, had quite high alcoholism levels during the GDR. Because it was shit to live there, so they did that to drink. They drank to cope with it, apparently, according to the museums. But yeah, that seems to have hung on. So there's lots of people just wandering around with beers. We went to the Stasi headquarters, which is now a museum about the Stasi.
Okay.
Which, when it was stormed, effectively, when the regime came down, some people got in, and those people, effectively, some of the people still run the museum now, ever since the Stasi was stormed. And it's, like, most of the offices have been left completely intact. So this is the actual head office of the Stasi headquarters. That's where the head of the Stasi would sit there and order all the stuffs.
And all they did was like put a red rope across the door, basically, but otherwise that's the same office. It's quite useful to have a museum of a place in the place, and it's not changed since then.
Yeah, exactly. But it was really weird. It was interesting.
Or is that cheating? Is that a cheating way to build a museum?
There was other stuff in there as well.
Okay.
But the bit that really got me was when the building was kind of stormed, and there was all the records there that they've been sort of keeping on everything, and all the kind of spying what they'd done, and all the kind of like evidence of all the terrible things that they've been doing for years and years and years. They had to have people protect the building so that the Stasi didn't get in, because when they caught them, they were like destroying all the records and things. So they had to have people protect the buildings and various other buildings as well, to make sure they didn't get in and destroy more documents. So what the Stasi did was they had some of their agents infiltrate the community groups who were calling for the people who were going to be in there saving it all, and got their people elected into, sort of like nominated into the building.
Starting to sound a lot like an American election, this.
Yeah. But yeah, so it was like, we think we need someone in there to make sure those records aren't being destroyed when they get in. It's one of their agents destroying records. So yeah, absolutely fascinating. I went to the Gestapo headquarters, which is now the topography of terror, where they have a big museum about what the German kind of the Nazi regime did to people and to Jewish people during the thing.
So Gestapo headquarters is still there. They're not.
They've changed it now into a museum, but it's like there were people tortured on that spot, and then
I know,
you're still on the spot.
Like Hitler's bunker, they like filled in with concrete and just put a nondescript plaza over the top, and we just pretend it wasn't there.
They don't pretend it's not there. It's on every kind of tour, though. Like we walked past, it was like a tour of random Spanish people just stood in a car park.
Right, okay.
This must be it then. This is probably the one. We went to the Jewish Museum, which is kind of cool because the ground floor of it is obviously quite Holocausty, understandably. There's a lot of that gone on there. A bit Holocausty, fine.
I'm not sure that word's ever been used before.
I don't think so. I'm an innovator, Mike. I'm an innovator. But you got to the higher floors, and it was a little bit like a child's introduction to Judaism.
Okay.
Including like why being an Orthodox Jew is great, and why it's great for women. And it kind of didn't go into the fact that in the super Orthodox parts, like if you are menstruating, you have to be like kept aside and no one's allowed to touch you, and you have to kind of send your underwear to a rabbi for him to approve the fact that you are no longer bleeding and therefore allowed to be touched again. Right. That bit was kind of glossed over in the Isn't Judaism Great? But one thing that really struck me was like it was random people's lives, and it was stuff like. There's a pair of trousers, and this is from like so-and-so Strauss, whose son started getting some material and then making that into trousers that he'd sell to people, and that boy was Levi Strauss, and it just felt like it was sort of going, yeah, you see that person over there? They were Jewish as well, you know. Yeah, see this person over here? Turns out Jewish. It was like just a list of Jewish people you might know from history, basically. It was a bit weird. But yeah, that was good. The architecture of the building was really interesting.
Okay.
Yes, that was good. That was a good holiday. So that was Berlin. Then I got back, and the next weekend we went on the March for Europe.
Yes.
Went to London, which was really cool. So I went down with Nicola and Laurie and Karen and Emma, and we all kind of went down super early in the morning, like 5:00, like 7:15 on a Saturday, which is just offensive. It might even been earlier than that. It was absolutely ridiculous. And it was a case that they were expecting about 25,000 people, and they reckon more than 50,000 turned up, and it might have been closer to 100. It's hard to get the exact estimates. But certainly so many people turned up that the march started more than an hour and a half late.
Okay.
And we saw pictures like they were arriving at the destination of the march while we were less than halfway along the march, and then there was fuckloads of people behind us as well. Like when we got to the end, there were still some people right at the start.
Right.
So there was a huge, huge number of people. But the thing is, people got really restless when they were there in the march, because before it got started, you just stood there for an hour and a half. And I was saying to Nicola about how, you've got to bear in mind that there's a lot of people here, and we've got to make sure they're all going the same direction. And because there's lots of people, it's even harder to organise them all to get in the same direction. But if we all stick together, we can all go in the right direction. And the influence of us all walking in the same direction at the same time will be much better. So it's worth sticking about to make sure, because when we get there, it'll be worth it. Because, yes, progress is slow, but keep faith, and we'll get to the place we need to go. Because the alternative is that we go and start our own march over there. And it'd be miles quicker, because we're not bogged down by having to turn all these people around and agree with all these people. It's going to be much more slimline. But if we do go and start our own march over there, no one's going to listen to it. That's not going to have any influence on anything. It's not going to have any effect on anything. And worse than that, the people we're marching against, they're not going to notice it. But the people in the march aren't even going to be led by any of the suggestions we'd make about how to chant or what direction to go or how fast to go. They're just going to ignore us as well. We'll just be out there marching by ourselves completely ineffectually. That was the point that I was making. But one of the things I did like is we marched past the Hilton, I think it was.
Right.
And, like I say, 50,000+ people. And we all noticed, as everyone was walking past, we noticed 15 stories up, there's a lady in the window, and she's very clearly doing a porn shoot. Very clearly, sat on the windowsill, sort of posing this way, and you can see a flash, and then the flash of the camera, but also, and then she was just hand on the side of her head, leg up on the side. So everyone's marching for Europe. Ooh, sexy lady, marching for Europe. So that was kind of funny. And then the last thing that I've got a story that might come close to your mouse story.
Oh, blimey.
I've got flies.
Fly story?
Flies. Fucking flies.
A fly story.
So I was starting to see 2 or 3 flies knocking around my dining room. That's not good. They've come from somewhere. It's barely come out of winter, as Alice was pointing out. Shouldn't be flies. And then there was more flies. And then I came in one day and there was 10 flies on the dining room window. And I go, oh, something's dead in it.
You're not talking zippers?
No, I'm not talking zippers. I'm not talking zippers.
There's just flies all over your dining room. You don't know why. You don't know where they come from.
Yeah, I don't know why I started buying so much seamstress equipment when I don't even own a sewing machine. Yeah, exactly. But they were on the inside, not the outside as well. So you open it and then lots of them kind of leave. And so I'd close it again. They're all left. And then, later, there's 3 or 4 more of them. Oh, where they're all coming from? And I literally turned every fucking brick of that room upside down, pulled all the furniture out, ended up sort of taping up the fireplace in case they were coming from there.
Right.
Cleaned out behind the DVD kind of cabinets and things, pulled the DVD cabinets out. So while looking for these flies, pulling the DVD cabinets out, put my hand on the wall and went, oh, that wall feels a bit damp. Oh, that wallpaper doesn't feel in good condition. I can put my finger sort of straight through it, or I can sort of pull it. Oh, it pulls off all the way to the ceiling in one go and is kind of a bit minging behind, because when we moved in, we obviously haven't had a chance to decorate that room yet.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's been decorated for 30 years or something, and it's all gone mingy from having damp and stuff there. So I pulled that off and pulled a bit more wallpaper off, and then thought, well, while I'm taking the wallpaper off, I might as well get a hammer and take the dado rail off as well, because we don't want that. And so now my dining room is in a complete mess because we had some flies. And at the end of all that, still fucking flies. Still fucking flies. So now I'm just zapping the bastards with fly spray.
Right.
They can fuck off. Little bastards.
Pesticides. I see.
The problem was, when you use the fly spray, you're supposed to shut the window and shut all the doors of the room, then stand in the middle of the room and sort of do a sweeping motion.
You're not just zap it at them until they fall over.
Well, you can do that as well.
Right.
But to just generally inoculate the room wherever they might be hiding.
Okay. So sort of fly vaccination.
Exactly. You spray it everywhere and you kind of smoke them out, essentially. So you do that, and you do it for 10 to 15 seconds as you slowly back out of the room to the door and then leave. And I did that, and then I kind of left it a while and kind of ventilated it. And then I saw some more and I sprayed them a bit more. And then about 5 minutes later, I realised I was really lightheaded. And I'd the only thing I'd successfully fly sprayed was myself. I'd managed to poison myself with fly spray. So I had to go and have a lie down. And the fly still came. So I'm being vanquished. I'm being bested by flies tactically at the moment, but I do think I'll win this war.
That's a disgrace. We've also got one of our infrequent installments of shit what we got wrong because we're fucking morons.
Okay, yeah. Who got what wrong and who's morons?
Turns out that in Bad Influence, they never had a data burst. It was a data blast.
Was it?
Data blast, not
what?
data burst.
Shit, you tell you what that is. That's a Mandela effect right there. Because I definitely grew up and it was a data burst.
Data blast. Because what I did was I went onto YouTube and I watched an episode of Bad Influence.
The whole thing.
I watched the whole thing. They were talking about, there's this like new game that's come out on the Commodore 64.
Oh,
that's
Commodore 64.
Exciting. Isn't that fucking brilliant?
What was the game?
I don't fucking remember. It wasn't that good a game.
Disappointing.
But yeah, they'd say, "Oh, we'll do that at the data blast at the end," and it's like, "Oh,
I don't think I like a data blast.
Data blast. It's a data blast."
I mean, I'm fine with. I'm fine that it was a data blast, but I think they were wrong to go for that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be blasted by data. I don't mind data bursting out, like burst of data, run away from the data. But like blast,
a blast of data,
blast you right in the face with some datums.
Blast of data. So suddenly, I'm sold on the whole Mandela thing. He definitely died in prison.
He definitely did. Listeners, do you remember Bad Influence being a data blast? Actually, listeners, do you remember Bad Influence? Or are we barking up the wrong tree on that one? I think we might well be.
I had one more thing to say. I just remembered. I have been absolutely inundated with messages after the last episode of the show. I have had something like 145 messages in a week and a half.
That's 2 from each of our listeners.
From people who, all entirely positive, from people who have appreciated the last episode of the show, or particularly the segment that I did. So I want to say thank you to all of our wonderful, lovely listeners.
Our listeners are awesome.
Who have said very nice things, but also lots of people who have shared their stories, which has been amazing. Lots of people who have said that it helped them reassess the situation that they were in. Lots of people who've said that they've gone and seen their doctors off the back of it, which makes me feel great that I've actually helped people to kind of get to that position. People who enjoy Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Loads of messages. It's been brilliant.
Good.
And lots of people who've said they haven't had any experience with depression, but that it's helped them to understand. So it goes to show that opening up about these things can be really positive.
Well, it also shows how common it is as well. I mean, people can feel like they're the only ones going through that kind of thing, but it just shows by how many people got in touch with you about this, shows that this is not a rare thing to be stigmatized, but it's a pretty normal part of life for some people.
We've had lots of people writing in saying you were describing exactly me and how I feel, which I think is it's definitely a way of reaching out to those people and make them feel like they're not the only person who feels like this. They're not alone at all. That was awesome, and we didn't have
that's shit. What we got right.
That's shit. What we got right
because we're ace and brilliant.
Because we're fucking brilliant.
Yeah. So I had an interesting day yesterday as of recording. I was testing a psychic. Alongside Laurie from this parish and several other volunteers.
I was in Morecambe.
You two were both meant to be testing a psychic.
I was in Morecambe.
Both of you had better things to do.
Yeah.
So instead...
I had it down in my diary for the wrong day.
Right, which means that you're not psychic.
Which doesn't help.
You are definitively not psychic in that case. No, so it was this...
It wasn't April Fool's Day that you did it on, though.
It was initially going to be April Fool's Day.
That's why it was in my diary for the wrong day.
But it couldn't be because the venue that we were using, which is the pub that we host Skeptics in the pub in, the derby was on in there.
Liverpool derby,
so we couldn't have done it in there because, in Liverpool, you're not going to get a pub space. So instead, we booked 2:00 in the pub that we use for Skeptics in the pub.
Sure.
Until the day before, where we found out that the manager had forgotten we'd booked it and had booked a singer for 2:00.
Right.
So, all right, we've booked 11:30 then. So we were there at 11:30. Surprising, the pub was full at 11:30 with people eating breakfast.
Oh, yeah, they do an Irish breakfast.
They do an Irish breakfast.
No.
I know where the kitchen is.
Where?
Right next to the loos.
No,
especially those loos.
No, those are terrible loos.
I mean, the pub is lovely. The pub is
great.
very nice. It's nice.
Especially the room.
The pub is the right shape,
yeah,
and available, and we fill it, and it's free.
And it's great.
But don't eat there, guys. Don't eat there, guys.
Even
if you want an Irish breakfast and your standards are low, don't eat there, guys. But yeah, so it was already kind of full at that point. So yeah, to go back a little bit. A chap got in touch with the Skeptics group, and I won't use his real name just because I haven't cleared the use of his name.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure he potentially wants. So let's call him Kevin.
Okay.
So Kevin got in touch with a Skeptics group because he believes he has a level of ability that he can't understand, he can't explain, and wants to see what's kind of going on with it.
Sure.
And because he was relatively local to us, that Skeptics group got in touch with us and asked us to kind of do a test with it. So then we were in this position that we've not been in for a while now. I think we did it. I last tested a psychic back in 2012, I think it's been. You guys haven't tested a psychic before, I don't think, have you?
No.
So we're in this weird position where you now have to figure out what exactly is this person's claim. So having a chat with Kevin, what became kind of clear is that he thinks he could transmit thoughts to the people, that people could read his thoughts, that could hear what he was kind of saying.
Sure.
And that's always the kind of thing, really, is to isolate when you're in this position where you're testing these kind of claims, figure out exactly what it is that they can do. Because there's no point saying, you're psychic, so I know what psychic means, therefore this is exactly what you're going to do, because it might not be that they can't do that thing at all. It might be that that's not what their power kind of relies on, or what they perceive as their ability. It's not what that relies on. So he now thinks he can that other people can read his thoughts. So you're trying to figure out how exactly to test that, because you can't just have him in a room saying, right, can anyone tell what I'm thinking? Because that's going to be so broad, and it's very hard. It'd be hard for him to get it right anyway, because if he's thinking of a house and you say, I'm thinking of like a shop or a garage, then at what point does that count as a hit? You're thinking building, you're thinking people are in it, but it's not exactly right. Getting the levels of that right are almost impossible. So we thought, let's kind of lock this claim down to something unequivocal, right or wrong, black and white, understandable.
Sure.
So we thought, what if we were to give this nice chap, a randomly generated 4-digit number that he would then transmit to one of our volunteers. And if the volunteer gets all 4 digits of that number right, then that counts as a hit. If they get 3 right, that's a miss. You know, you can't
Sure.
get away with it being, well, it was 1257 and I was thinking 1258. That's a miss. That's a 100% miss. It's not a near miss or anything like that.
Okay.
And the good thing about that is that makes it not only easy to tell exactly what's going on, it also makes it relatively easy to figure out the kind of maths on it. So if you're going for a 4-digit number where it's 0 to 9 is each of the digits, you're looking at 1 in 10,000 chance of getting it right.
Yeah.
If we then have 5 volunteers doing this test on 5 different people kind of thing, then you've got 1 in 10,000 chance of getting it right. So really, if you get 1 of those, that's not bad. If you get 2 of those, that's really impressive by that point. You're already kind of hitting quite... And I would do the math on how to do it, but on exactly what the likelihood of getting 2 out of 5, at least 2 out of 5 right is. But A, that's boring, and B, I'm got a fucking clue how to do it. So I won't kind of go through the maths on it. So we kind of designed this protocol of having Kevin come in, and we said that we give a number to one of our volunteers, and they'd be thinking of that number, and then he'd write down the number that they were thinking of, and we'd have it all kind of filmed and everything like that. And we put that out there, and then we realised that we got that completely wrong, because it wasn't that he thought he could read minds, it was that he thought he could transmit.
Yeah.
And it was what was interesting is I don't think when I wrote that protocol, I don't think I'd realised the mistake, and I think I passed it around the board, and I don't think you guys noticed it either.
No, we didn't. No.
It was when we passed it to an external person, and they were like, "Yeah, but that's not what he says he can do."
Yeah.
And it kind of shows it's really easy to make a mistake on that kind of thing. It's so getting the exact kind of details right can be really hard. So we changed it around and thought, okay, now we need him to be the transmitter and our volunteers to be the receiver. So we need to make sure, first of all, that our volunteers are open and receptive, because what we don't want is for Kevin to be able to say, well, you chose a lot of people who knew that, who wanted me to fail.
Yeah.
I got the feeling.
Who received the number and knew what it was and then said something deliberately wrong because they wanted to catch the psychic guy out.
Yeah, exactly. And to a degree, that's sort of impossible to control for.
It is, yeah.
But you've got to get as close as you can. And we sort of were able to talk Kevin through it, and he met the kind of volunteers ahead of time and had a bit of a chat with them. And I think he seemed very happy that we were on board with it. And I think one of the ways that you make sure that the person who's making the claims is comfortable and believes that you're on their side is to actually be on their side. For me, when I was writing the protocol, the most important thing was it was as comfortable as possible for Kevin to do whatever he needs to do.
Yeah.
Except if there is any chance of information leakage through non-supernatural means, we need to make sure that's restricted.
Yeah. We want to design the system so that it is easy for him to do what he needs to do, but difficult for someone to cheat.
Yeah.
If they were inclined to.
Yeah, even if we don't think for a second he was going to cheat. And I don't actually think for a second he didn't seem to me like he was going to cheat, but what do I know? I'm sure the scientists who were testing the alpha kids didn't think they were going to cheat either.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we did was we brought Kevin in to chat to our volunteers. We didn't tell him who the volunteers were ahead of time. We made sure they were our volunteers and not his volunteers. So he thought initially that we might be able to just pick people off the street. So anyone just kind of walking past. Now, I thought that would not be a good idea, partly because we were in a pub with lots of people having an Irish breakfast and having a few drinks. I thought, God, can you imagine trying to go into a random pub and saying, hey, does anyone want to sit for a few minutes and receive a psychic message? I don't think many people would be interested in doing that in a way that we could rely on them not taking the piss and not being disruptive or anything like that. But also, ultimately, he could, if he's agreed with us that we're picking random people off the street, he could get a lot of his mates to just kind of wander past the pubs at the right time and end up getting the people in if he was going to cheat.
If he was going to cheat, sure.
Someone who was inclined that way could do that. So we had our volunteers. We said we can't tell you who they were ahead of the day, but he kind of came along and had a bit of a chat with them. And that was kind of the last interaction he had with the volunteers before the test. And then we'd go along and we'd sit Kevin down at his table, and then we bring one of our volunteers along and make sure they were sat down before we give out any random generated numbers, so there's no chance that the volunteer could accidentally see the number out the corner of their eye as they're walking past.
How did you generate the random numbers?
Randomnumbergenerator.org, I think it was.
Okay.
We literally Googled random 4-digit number, and there was a generator for it.
Because I wanted to use the big raffle ticket generator that they've got in the pub that gives a big red LED display.
Yeah, I can't see why that would have been a problem to have a massive,
a light up
a half a foot tall, bright red light up the entire room.
But it
digital
looks
display.
Brilliant.
It was fucking ludicrous. It was
unworkable. It was magnificent. I had to figure out how to program the fucking thing first to go for 4-digit. I figured all that out.
Yeah.
And then presented
the whole
it
while I was like,
with a big fucking triangular South Park smile on my face going, look at this! And you're like, we can't use that because it'll reflect off the walls and people will see it. It's shit.
Yeah, anybody who glances around for a second, if they look for a second, they'd see it out the corner of their eye.
But it looks so cool.
Yeah, so that's the kind of controls you've got to put in place. So one of the things we were doing as well was we'd do this randomly generated number. I would show him the number on my phone and write it down on a piece of paper, and you'd write the number and the word for that number underneath.
So you couldn't pretend,
F-O-U-R. So
that's not a 9, that's a 6.
That 7's a 1. I totally misunderstood it. And then once Kevin was happy that he understood the number, he'd sign the piece of paper to agree that he knew what that number was and he was very comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. And then he'd sit there and transmit it. Now, we were asking Kevin ahead of time, when you transmit these numbers, what's it like for the recipient? Because there's no point saying to our receivers that you will see the number in front of you in your mind's eye when actually Kevin thinks he can do it so they will hear it essentially as if they're speaking.
Yeah, to hear it audibly or when it airs.
Exactly. There's no point them looking for or waiting for them to hear it audibly if they're meant to just get a vague sense, like the first number they think of is the right one because he influences them that kind of way. So let's try and figure out what it's like for the recipients too. And he said, well, it should be pretty instant, and you should actually be able to sort of hear. It's like you're hearing my voice, basically.
Right.
And we said, okay, but on the off chance that it isn't instant, on the off chance that they don't instantly hear your voice saying a number, how long do you think it would take? Because we also don't want him to say, well, you rushed me through this test, and actually, if I had stayed a little bit longer, but you didn't want me to succeed, so you put a lot of pressure on, you stopped as quickly as possible. And he said, well, it should be instant. I said, well, would 3 minutes be fine? We were initially going for 5 minutes, but because we started about an hour and a half later than we were hoping to, and
there was a singer coming.
There was a singer coming.
Yeah,
the singer actually came 15 minutes earlier, so it came midway through the final test, which was like, get out! You're disrupting things. So that was kind of awkward. But yeah, he was happy with 3 minutes. So we then had, our receiver sit down, and for 3 minutes, everyone would be in silence as Kevin transmitted these thoughts. Kevin was initially surprised that they weren't face to face. That we had the receiver sat at one table, Kevin sat on a table behind, but the receiver was facing away. And we were sort of saying, well, if someone was going to come along and cheat, they might be mouthing the number, they might be blinking a certain number of times, there might be something that they could do. And he was kind of happy with that. He said it won't really matter. He said, a lot of the time when he sends these thoughts, people aren't even in the same town as him, and they'll pick up on it. So he certainly thinks there's when it works, he thinks there's a level of transmission going on there. So yeah, we had this kind of interesting and relatively... how these tests always work, almost inevitably, is that once you set it up, the actual process of it is relatively boring. Because you've got 3 minutes of silence while one person stares at the back of another person's head. And we said to the receivers, if you get a number, write it down and put your hand up. It got to the end of 3 minutes, they didn't have a number, so I said, well, it's the end of the time now. If you don't have a number written down, could you please write one down? Then we had 2 cameras set up at all times for this, one from either corner of this, so everything was in shot at all times, and we were able to sort of show the piece of paper to the camera, and then have it all kind of sealed and move everything around and everything like that. So it was relatively controlled, and it's interesting to do it that kind of way. Now, the other thing we did was to get Kevin to rate how confident he was or how happy he felt with that particular transmission on the back of each time. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how easy do you find that? How likely do you think it's going to work? Just give me a score out of 10 for what you think about the experience. And that's what he kind of did. And we sort of sealed those on envelopes. And then we did the kind of gentle unveiling where we'd go through the envelopes at the same time. I would handle the ones that Kevin was touching. Laurie was handling the ones that the recipients were touching. I never touched the recipients. Laurie never touched the transmitters.
Sure.
So we had two separate wings of the test there.
So you didn't reveal as you went along. You saved it all to the end, so it's not, if he gets the first couple wrong, knock his confidence and all that.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted it to be sort of as clean as possible because you don't want the one test to be kind of influenced by the other. And also, we were fairly low on time, and what I didn't want to happen was for Kevin to do the first test, find out it was wrong, and think, actually, I think I want to stop here, or I think I don't feel right now. I'm going to go away from it and come back. I thought we need to. If we'd have had a bit longer, then maybe we'd have gained a bit more time. But I think doing the 5 together kind of made sense, so there was no possibility of collusion. And so it came to results, and it turned out that Kevin got 0 out of 5 correct. So the thoughts that he was transmitting, 0 out of 5 times did the recipients write those thoughts down. And in fairness, that's what you'd expect with chance, because the chances of guessing a 4-digit number are pretty slim. Trying 5 times to guess a randomly generated 4-digit number, you're unlikely to get it right. And it'd be kind of interesting if you did get it right. It'd be very interesting to get to.
Yeah.
So Kevin,
oddly enough, if it was not randomly generated, it might be much easier because I know this through research that I've done into password security. If you set a password to be a 4-digit PIN, for example, on your smartphone, terrific number of them will begin with the digit 19 because people choose years. So they will put 19 and then some year. So that immediately narrows it down from 1 in 10,000 to about 1 in 100.
That's true, yeah.
Chances are, if they've chosen a year, they've chosen a birthday of themselves or a relative. So that actually probably narrows it down to about 1 in 50.
Yeah.
And so if you have a free choice in this, it's no longer a 1 in 10,000 chance by any stretch of the imagination. It narrows it down quite significantly.
The thing is, that it's hard because obviously you need to be able to remember the number. So it needs to be something important. But if you are going to go for a date, you could fuck people up by just reversing the date.
Sure.
That might sort of screw people a little bit.
But there's a very interesting scientific paper on the likelihood of guessing a 4-digit number.
Really?
On the basis of leaked passwords, so where people have hacked into password databases and leaked them to the internet. Computer security academics have then taken those databases and scoured them to figure out, okay, how many people choose shit passwords, to then publish that data and say, okay, you can expect this percentage of your users to choose shitty passwords that are easy to guess.
Might there be an effect of that, though, where they say, this is the shittest kind of password? So you're more likely to start 19. You're very, very unlikely to start 73. From then on, everyone starts a password. So they think, I've got the best password now. I looked it up. Security experts said this was the best password. I think it could be. So 0 out of 5. And he actually, when we looked at it, he actually had a fairly low confidence for each reading as well. And when I chatted to him about that, he was just saying, well, it's hard to always get in the frame of mind. But talking to him, I don't think that was him trying to sort of hedge, as you might get from someone who knows they're fraudulent and is they're just looking for an out of well, if I get this right, it's great. If I don't get it right, I can say I wasn't very confident.
Setting up their out ahead of time. You don't think that was one?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just that he was someone who thinks he's got this ability, who's only ever seen positive reinforcement of that ability, either from his perception or maybe from the perception of people around him who said, it was confirmed that. But a level of uncertainty because it's not always there because, in my opinion, it's not there. So I think that was much more likely to be the case there. So kind of one of the questions I guess some of the listeners might be thinking of this would be, what was the point? We spent an afternoon yesterday or a morning yesterday with a stranger who says he's got a psychic ability that at the end of which we found out he didn't have a psychic ability, or at least didn't exhibit a psychic ability on the time that we tested him. What does anyone get out of this? Is this not just a case of we know that psychics aren't real, move on, do something more important, go off and find a better way to spend your time, go and play the latest Zelda game or rewatch Bad Influence for their data blasts? Well, I think there's a couple of things that are worth it that are worthwhile of having done this experiment, of having done this test. first of all, from Kevin's side, he might genuinely been very confused, maybe even distressed. And he might have thought that he's got this ability. He might have thought he's not quite sure whether it's good or bad. He might have thought that he's not quite sure where it's come from, what it means. He might have even thought that if we refused to test him, if no one ever would engage with him, then there's a reason why no one will ever engage with him. They won't even talk to him about this. This is something they don't want to admit is out there.
Sure.
He might have thought there were agents acting against him. It could have played into all sorts of things, depending on the type of person who's got the belief or the type of kind of environment they're from. And it might well be that he'd never know how to test these ideas under ways that bias doesn't creep in, because that's not a normal thing to think of. People don't look for ways that their biases might be influencing their perception. So by at least having that opportunity to talk him through the types of things that you could do to test these things, maybe you'll give that person the right sort of tools to be able to tell what's real and what's not in terms of their beliefs in the future. And the other thing it shows is that people who don't believe that the psychic powers have been proven to be true or may not even exist, it shows that we're not bad people, that we are relatively helpful, that we're willing to be kind of polite and friendly and good-natured and nice, which is also important, I think, because especially if you go down the other kind of areas of psychic when it comes to talking to the dead, stuff like that, you go to a psychic show, and often if skeptics are talked about, they're talked about in hushed tones of those people, those naysayers, those doubters, those people who just they're terrified and they want to keep you down, they want to deny you access to this other kind of realm, and they've got all these kind of big, bad, evil stories about us a lot of the time. And if the time that the person who believes in these things, if the time they come across someone who is a skeptic, they find that person is actually pretty nice, pretty warm, pretty friendly, kind of supportive, and willing to help, then I think at least, they may come away from that conversation thinking, well, at least not all skeptics are bad. Maybe skeptics aren't all that kind of bad. Maybe in the future I can talk to skeptics when I've got these kind of concerns of what I can or can't do. From our side, I think we get a few things from it. First of all, you get experience in how to set up testing unusual ideas. And not all of them will be as straightforward to test as this one kind of turned out to be. Yeah. But just the experience of designing a protocol is pretty interesting, and running a protocol and figuring out the exactly how to do these things. Yeah. I mean, I found that I was kind of when I was showing stuff to the camera, showing the transmitting number to the camera before I started the test, I was at times forgetting to show it to the camera until after the test. And just knowing the discipline of showing. I mean, it was still shown to the camera, and it was still kept away from someone. It was all on camera at all times, but literally holding it up to the camera so the camera knew the number. Yes. On one of them, I didn't think to do it because in the heat of the test, you forget protocol. So following protocol can be quite hard. So I think that's good. I think some of the other people there wouldn't have had the chance to be part of a test or even to run a test. I think Laurie's tested any psychic ideas before, and it's quite a useful, interesting thing. And it means that the next time we come across people with psychic abilities, we know the type of things to look for.
Yeah. Also, working on these kind of protocols and thinking about how someone could cheat and how you can control for that is a useful skill in reading other scientific papers and figuring out, okay, if I wanted to scam this or cheat this or change this or whatever, how would I do that? And then have they controlled for that? And it helps build up your critical faculties on non-pseudoscience-based topics as well.
Yeah, and also on life. I mean, how do you test whether your own ideas are based in reality or whether you've got a gap in logic, a flaw in logic? How do you put your own ideas to a road test? By going through these things, you can find out how your own ideas might be sort of sense checked. And I think the other thing is, being in that room, and I think many of the volunteers would agree with me. And Emma was a volunteer, and Karen was a volunteer, and Sarah Clement was a volunteer, and there was a couple of Laurie's friends too. I think for those people, if they hadn't met psychics before, it might be very easy, and not just them, and I'm not singling those 5 out, but for people generally, if you haven't met a psychic before, or someone who thinks they have these kind of abilities, it's very easy to write them all off as liars and con artists and grief vampires and exploiters and paint them in the most evil of terms. And there are certainly some who fit into that category. But the situation is much more nuanced, and you have people who clearly, seemingly, utterly believe in what they're saying. Seem at times even you find some people who can be even distressed by the idea of what's happening to them because they don't understand it. And I think being in that room with someone who really, in my opinion, sincerely believes what they're saying, it's very hard to come away with that sense that everyone who says this is a liar. Yeah. You put the humanity back into the other side of the equation. I think that's an important thing for us as skeptics to have as often as we can, really.
So pain is an interesting and unusual thing.
So I hear.
As much as any commonplace experience can be described as unusual.
Yes.
Is it literally unusual? No, it is actually very usual.
That's the very
it happens
definition of
all
pain.
the fucking time.
Well, it happens more. It happens all the time
depends
for
on
you.
the person.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for me.
Yeah, you live in constant pain.
Yes.
But I'm all right often.
Yeah?
Stubbed my toe earlier. That's about it.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, my feet hurt. My necrotizing fasciitis is improving, but still not gone away yet.
I went to the dentist, so that hurt a bit because he poked my gum with a little spiky thing.
I also went to the dentist.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You've not been for ages.
Beautiful teeth.
I was told. You know what? You clean your teeth exceptionally.
Yeah.
You clean exceptionally well. There's just nothing on them. It's fine.
My dentist said to me, "Well, keep flossing," and I'm like, "I'm not flossing, mate."
You've mugged him right off.
What are you
This
talking
is a
about? I'm
male
not
thing.
flossing.
Men always have better teeth. It really frustrates me. I look after my teeth. My teeth are not in as good condition.
Yeah. Hashtag privilege.
Hashtag privilege. It genuinely is a male thing. Hormones are not good for your teeth.
Yeah.
As it happens, which is why pregnant women tend to have terrible teeth because
Oh, that's a harsh thing to say about pregnant women. There might be some pregnant women listening to this, and you've had a right talk about them there, Alice.
there's a lot of people, a lot of women who don't have fillings at all until they get pregnant, and then they get lots of fillings because
baby
it's
stealing their calcium.
It's not very good for their teeth.
Swines that they are.
Yeah, little buggers.
Little swines. But the thing about pain is that it's incredibly subjective. We have no reliable way to determine how much pain somebody else is in other than just asking them. And we can do things like functional MRIs, which help us infer brain activity associated with pain. And it turns out that fMRIs do correlate reasonably well with reported pain.
You can do that smiley face test where you have a smiley face with a slightly different expression from 0 to 10. What's the name of that test? You know that one?
I can't remember the name of the test, but I was listening. Well, it's pain ratings, but I was listening to a really interesting podcast about it recently from the How Stuff Works people.
Yes.
About pain ratings and things. And they were talking about how people self-report, but also a lot of doctors have to try and read body language to try and figure out what kind of pain somebody's in, which relies on you learning how to show body language. Like if you grow up in pain, like I did, I don't show that I'm in pain very often.
Pain,
it's not. I don't grimace when I'm in pain because there's no point. It doesn't change anything.
Yeah. I bet you do sometimes.
Sometimes I do, but it depends on the severity of the pain or how sudden it is. Like pain that's come out of nowhere, you're more likely to grimace. But if you've got chronic pain, it's not productive. It doesn't do anything. So you tend to learn to just keep it masked so that nobody asks you about it.
But even fMRIs are still something of a blunt instrument in terms of being able to objectively measure pain. The thing that we refer to as pain, in fact, has got several components to it. And what we experience as pain is the aggregate of those components. So a useful analogy here might be vision. Most skeptics are already aware of the fact that what you see isn't actually what you see.
Yes.
We do not have access to the raw vision signal that comes down our optic nerve. What we get has been filtered, processed...
by the matrix,
and
switch the right way up.
Reconstructed to flip the right way over.
That's annoying, isn't it? That we have to have upside down eyes.
Well, what's really cool is like how the brain plasticity works. Like they've done these really cool experiments in frogs where they've switched the eyes the wrong way up, and the brain flips it again and puts it the right way up again.
They've done it with people, but not like turning your eyes upside down.
Special binocular things,
special glasses.
So what Steve Novella has described what we see as like a 3D simulation, like the brain constructs out of the various pieces of information it has available to it a
matrix,
a 3D version of the world,
matrix,
a real-time 3D version of the world that it then presents to us consciously as if the consciousness is somehow.
I'm not going to go like red pill here on you.
We go a bit.
I haven't seen the Matrix.
How have you not seen the? I mean, Matrix 2 and 3, fair enough, because they're bollocks. But how are you not seen Matrix?
Because I've got no one to watch it with me.
Warren not up for the Matrix.
I know has watched it, so
and Warren
doesn't like to rewatch films.
It's only all right. It's kind of Plato's Cave with a guy in a leather jacket.
I remember when I was a kid, there were two films that I came home. I'd been outside because, part of the reason I never watched telly as a kid was because I was outside climbing trees and stuff. And I'd been outside and I came home and my parents, there's two films I remember walking in and my parents watching, like they were right at the end of, and I was like properly gutted because I wanted to watch those films. You said you'd watch them with me and you've watched them without me. One was The Matrix and the other was Ghostbusters. I only watched Ghostbusters like last year, maybe the year before. I was properly gutted.
I liked The Matrix. It's. I mean, I get what you're saying is kind of Plato's Cave, but just a thing, or with
guns.
The nice thing about it, though, is it's a nice way to relate that philosophical idea to people in an accessible way.
True. The annoying thing about it... Because
now you could just go, it's like the Matrix.
Yeah, the annoying thing about it is all the people who thought this was like groundbreaking philosophy, who you get into philosophical conversations, go, but you don't know we're not living in the Matrix. Oh, you've watched the Matrix and now you think you're a fucking philosophy. I mean, I'm not a philosophy expert, far, far from it, but fuck you still.
So the brain presents this kind of 3D simulation of the world, and sometimes that goes wrong. Optical illusions, for example, are examples of ambiguous input tricking the brain into making an error in its simulation.
Can you get an optical delusion?
We will come to that in a second. Actually.
Will we? Oh, brilliant!
Isn't that a hallucination?
Basically, yes.
That's boring.
So the very next point that I've got written
What about
down,
an optical collusion?
Yes, where we all decide that you can see something when you
can't. Exactly. Yeah.
Isn't that like when you're a teenager and drink something that doesn't have alcohol in, but everybody's told you there's alcohol in it?
No, that's a placebo effect.
But you get some people, because of brain malfunction, maybe through damage or drug use, they will see things that aren't there at all. These are hallucinations or optical delusions.
If you see something that's a bit like something you've seen before, that's an optical illusion.
Illusion.
An optical
yes, with an A.
Illusion.
Nice. But in a hallucination, the brain is constructing images for its simulation which are not based on signals actually coming from the optic nerve, but they appear to be just as real to the person experiencing the hallucination. So similarly, raw pain signals which our brains receive are processed before the brain creates the experience we refer to as pain. This processing and therefore the final experience can be modified by a number of different factors, such as our current mood, our levels of stress and anxiety, how worried we are in anticipating that pain is coming, adrenaline levels, hormone levels, etc. And what we experience consciously as pain is not just the raw signal coming down the nerve; it is modified quite substantially. And just like when we see things that aren't there, sometimes we can feel pain that isn't there. Phantom limbs, for example,
yes.
You can get pain in phantom limbs. It could even be a real pain signal, which the brain is misinterpreting as being from a limb that it doesn't realize it doesn't have anymore. Or it could be completely psychogenic pain, so there's no actual pain signal going up your nerve, but you still feel pain in a part of your body.
I sometimes get pains in places where I'm like, it hurts there, so I press it, and then I realise, no, that's not where it hurts. And I have to kind of like prod around my body to figure out where the pain is coming from.
I used to have all of the Star Wars films, and then I got rid of the first one of the reboot, but I still get disappointed by it. I've got like a Phantom Menace. I still feel the pain of having watched it. Threw that one away, pretend it didn't exist, but I can still feel the pain of it.
But even completely psychogenic pain seems just as real to the person experiencing it, even if it's not prompted by any genuine pain signal. And then on top of all that, we have reporting bias. So even leaving aside clinical trials, if you ask someone a simple question like, does that hurt? Your answer could depend on many more things than just the pain signal that you're receiving, or even how much pain you're experiencing. So
humans say ow when they're surprised.
That's interesting.
People say "ow" when they're
surprised with pain.
Surprised. Well, not even when they're surprised with pain. When they're just surprised by something that they envisage could cause pain, but hasn't caused pain, they'll automatically say "ow."
That's interesting. Yeah. Well,
that's only because you say "ow" all the time.
Yeah.
To anything, if someone like flicks you, you'll go "ow."
But Alice,
I don't know what pain is.
Okay. Also, Alice is human. She did say that human beings do that.
Yeah, but like just that one possibly hurt.
It's a known phenomenon that people say "ow" when they're actually just surprised.
Okay.
But if you're donating blood or giving a blood sample and somebody sticks a needle in your arm, you're far more likely to respond to the question, does that hurt, with, oh no, it's fine.
I'm far more likely to just pass out.
I mean, you are, personally, that's true. Than you would be if you were experiencing exactly the same sensation in some sort of freak sewing accident.
Yes, yeah.
You go, no, it's a needle in my fucking arm, rather than, sharp scratch. And, does that hurt? No, it's fine. It hurts like a motherfucker, but you're just not going to say that.
It really doesn't.
Well, it depends on what you're doing.
And
depends
also,
on how much they've gouged around inside trying to get the needle in a vein either, which is not
the good
something
thing
I
about
generally
giving blood
have a
in
problem
Liverpool is that they're all really well trained, and so it hurts less than getting blood taken at the hospital.
Is that because they all did heroin as teenagers? They know how to hit a vein.
It's because it's a permanent...
On the downside, they do all share needles, so it's not...
It's a permanent blood donor site, so they're permanent employees rather than
Okay. So it is next to impossible to tease apart how much of reported pain is genuine sensation, how much is anxiety and other psychological factors, and how much of it is biased reporting, which makes pain a really tricky thing to study. So this week, I want to talk about 2 studies from the one area where even the damning 2010 Cochrane review says placebos seem to work.
Okay.
And that is pain. So, from Bad Science, Montgomery and Kirsch told college students that they were taking part in a study on a new local anesthetic called trivaricane. Trivaricane is brown and you paint it on your skin. It smells like medicine and it's so potent that you have to wear gloves when you handle it, or at least that's what they implied to the students. In fact, it's made of water, iodine and thyme oil, brackets for the smell, and the experimenter, who also wore a lab coat, was using rubber gloves for a sense of theatre. None of these ingredients will affect pain.
Iodine will stain your fingers.
That's true. The trivaricane was painted onto one or other of the subject's index fingers, and the experimenters then applied painful pressure with a vice. One after the other, in varying orders, pain was applied and trivaricane was applied, and as you would expect by now, the subjects reported less pain and less unpleasantness for the fingers that were pre-treated with the amazing trivaricane. So this paper was titled Mechanisms of Placebo Pain Reduction and Empirical Investigation and was published in the journal Psychological Science. 56 college students, so small numbers.
And college students, obviously.
Were randomized into gender-balanced groups. How many groups, I can't say because the paper doesn't say, which doesn't help. I think it's 3, but I can't be sure.
So each group's pretty small.
Yeah. Let me tell you what the groups are, and then we can talk some more about the groupings, because the groups are a bit weird. So the first group were taken into a room, and a hand was chosen in such a fashion that the same number of right hands and left hands were selected. So I imagine they probably just alternated. Like the first guy was left hand, the second guy was right hand, third guy was left hand, etc. They don't say, but I imagine it'll probably be something simple like because they wanted to balance the same number of left and right hands so as to not bias the study, especially with right-handed and left-handed people. Do you feel more pain in your dominant hand or less pain? Or
but that would only work. Then that should be dominant and offhand. For that latter to be true, you'd need to know how many right and left-handed people you had in each group and that you were doing it the right way.
That's true. And in fact, there's another study that I'm going to talk about later where they chose only right-handed people for the study to try and control for that dominant hand bias. So imagine it was probably just alternating hands. The first person had their nominated hand painted with trivaricane, which is a fictional topical painkiller. It doesn't actually do anything. It's just iodine, water, and smelly oil. They then had their finger put in a metal apparatus which applied around 20 newtons of force to the painted area for 1 minute. In the paper, they describe this as about 2,000 grams of force, but of course we know that force is not measured in grams.
No.
Mass is measured in grams, force is measured in newtons. So it's around 20 newtons of force.
Good, thank you.
After a minute, the participant's finger was removed from the apparatus and they were asked how intense their pain was, how unpleasant the sensation was, etc., on a standardized scale. They then had their other hand, which did not have trivaricane on it, locked in the same vice, again for a minute, and then were asked the same questions, how unpleasant it was, etc., etc., etc.
Presumably there's a wing of the trial where they do it the other way around.
Yes.
Good.
So that was the first group. The second group, they did the same thing, except in the second group, they did the finger without the trivaricane first to control for anxiety and expectation, modifying the pain.
Yes.
And once you'd had your hand in this contraption once, it might be the case that you aren't as worried about it the second time because you know how bad the pain is going to be.
Or you're more worried.
Or the reverse, it fucking hurt the first time around, and so now you're really anxious about it the second time.
Oh, you wonder why this guy keeps putting your fingers in vices. So once was fine, but come on, mate. There's only so many times you can have fingers in vices here.
So they control for that by switching the order up. So that was the second group. It was the same as the first group, but the order switched around. The third group, they did both hands at the same time.
All right, I see.
Both hands at the same time in the third group. And that was the more interesting part of the study for me, because what that does is it controls for global systemic effects. So if it were the case that placebo alters your pain response by prompting the release of endogenous painkillers, which some people argue that it does, then it should affect both hands in this third portion of the study. Doing both hands at once means you could rule out things like endogenous opioids being behind the differences between the hands.
Yep.
And so those were the three groups: sequential with trivaricane first, sequential with trivaricane second, and simultaneous. Except that the groups were then also divided into left hand with trivaricane or right hand with trivaricane. So is that 6 groups?
Okay.
Also, the abstract says that half the participants are in the simultaneous group and half are into the sequential group. So that's 56 students, 28 of them in the simultaneous group, 14 of those with trivaricane on the left hand and 14 with trivaricane on the right hand. Then 28 in the sequential group, 14 with trivaricane first, 7 of those on the left hand, 7 on the right hand. Then 14 with trivaricane second, 7 on the left hand. It's fucking confusing.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if they'd given a little bit more information about how those groups were divided.
They could have drawn a diagram, a table even.
They could.
A schematic. I love a good schematic.
But the paper concludes, significant and equivalent reductions in pain were reported as a function of placebo administration. These data indicate that reductions of experimental pain produced by placebos presented in the guise of a local anesthetic are not mediated by such global mechanisms as anxiety reduction or the release of endogenous opioids. What I think is interesting about that conclusion is that it does not say anything about what the placebo effect is. It only talks about what it's not. At least in the case of the administration of a bogus topical anesthetic, any placebo effect is not caused, at least entirely, by the release of endogenous opioids. In fact, in the discussion, the authors say, our data do not confirm any particular explanation for placebo effect that are equally supportive of conditioning, expectancy, and the compliance hypotheses.
But that's kind of the right way to phrase it.
Yes, it is.
To phrase it as this is what we've not proven, but we've not proven the hypothesis that we tested. That doesn't mean to say that we haven't. We're able to say that it's not happened in other ways.
They're doing the right thing, but my point is that you would expect to see these data if the placebo effect was the result of Pavlovian conditioning. You would expect to see this effect if it was a result of the amazing power of the mind over the body. But you would also expect to see this result if it's just biased reporting. So in citing this as the amazing power of the placebo effect, when actually all it does is say endogenous opioids and anxiety and not behind the placebo effect in this instance, it's not really...
It's not great,
It's not spectacular evidence. And there are good reasons to think that bias is a major contributing factor here. So, for example, there is no blinding. The administering physician knows that the trivaricane is bogus, and the participant knows which hand it's been painted onto, and therefore which hand they are expected to feel less pain in. Of course, it has to be unblinded, because what you're investigating here is the effect of the participant knowing that they're getting an intervention. The intervention itself is already inert. There's no point in painting water on their other hand, because
they're putting gloves on them.
They're both inert. We know that this is prone to bias. That's why we have placebo arms in clinical trials, so we can subtract these biases from our
So is this
analysis.
experimenter bias going to explain a lot of it? Because presumably, or some of it, because presumably the experimenter knows it's bull. No, because they know it's bullshit. Okay,
they do know. I mean, we don't know how much that has leaked to the participants as the result of the experiment. We don't know how much the participants thinking, well, that's the finger with it on, so it probably should feel less, and saying, it's a bit less.
Take me back to the thing. We didn't find anything in the results. Is that what they were saying?
All the results did was rule out that endogenous opioids are responsible for it, because if that were the case, then both hands would have had the same reduction in pain in the simultaneous.
But are you going to come to what else is in the results, basically?
No, that's it. That's the results.
So there was no positive result for the sequential?
That's right.
They didn't say at any point that if we do... this one was more positive than this one. So going this one first rather than that one, there's nothing like that.
No.
They didn't say that the people who had iodine on their finger reported that finger was in less pain than the one that didn't.
They did, but the people who had iodine on their finger reported less pain than the people who did not have iodine on their fingers. But that could be because of classical conditioning or mind over matter magic or biased reporting. And the paper says it could be any of these things. All we have proved is that it's not a systemic effect.
It's not something that's actually physiologically happening in terms of the chemistry of your body.
In terms of the global chemistry of your body.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But they do think they had a positive effect of something in the sequential group.
Yes.
They just don't know what.
Well, they just don't know what caused it. And if you look at the raw results, there was a decrease in pain in the people who had trivaricane on their fingers.
Yeah. But that is bias, yeah.
You would expect that from bias on its own. On top of that, there are flaws, if not in the study, but in the reporting of the study. So participants were told that if the pain got too much, they could ask to be released from the equipment. But then the paper doesn't say if anyone requested this and what happened to their data if they did.
Yeah, that's not good.
The researcher...
I doubt many people would have done.
But if you've got like 200 grams worth of pressure on you or like 40 centimetres, then you don't know how much that's going to affect you.
Yeah, but people will tend to...
But they should have said, they were told this, but nobody did.
Yeah, that needs to be in there.
So we actually have no idea.
It's a few extra words to a sentence.
Why didn't someone who peer-reviewed that pick that up?
Because peer reviewers don't read the papers properly.
Oh, this goes on a rant.
It's not a bad rant. Well, it is a bad rant. It's a bad rant in the terms of the journals. The reviewers aren't paid. They're not given any incentive to actually pay attention to the papers that they're reading.
Also, the researcher who applies the trivaricane was wearing a white lab coat and rubber gloves and were instructed that if they were asked why they were wearing gloves, they should tell the participants that it was to avoid overexposure to trivaricane to give the impression of a potent substance. But then the paper doesn't say how many people asked or split out their data to see if that information had an effect on the reported anesthetic effect. In short, these data are entirely compatible with the placebo effect of pain being mostly or entirely comprised of biased reporting, which is not necessarily a surprise. A very similar study is also cited by Ben Goldacre in his piece on the placebo effect for BBC Radio 4 in 2008.
Okay.
As part of that
You've
program,
gone beyond bad science and now into random things he said in random places.
It's a good program, actually, and he interviews several people that we've talked about in the show, including Daniel Moorman.
Next week, what Ben Goldacre once said over dinner, over breakfast.
So as part of that program, he spoke to Professor Anthony Jones about a study published in the journal Pain. Good place to publish pain research.
It is.
Are you sure it wasn't a journal about French bread?
Could be a journal about French bread.
It could be. Were they hurting people with French bread? Because those baguettes, you can do some serious damage.
Professor Anthony Jones told Ben Goldacre, people find it quite hard to grasp that this may be a real physiological phenomenon because you can only judge someone else's pain by what they tell you. So we did a study to try and show that this was a real phenomenon by using the techniques where we looked at the brain's response to a painful laser stimulus on the skin.
There's a problem there.
Yes?
We did a study to try and prove something.
Yes.
That's not how you conduct good science.
This paper was titled Placebo Conditioning and Placebo Analgesia Modulate a Common Brain Network During Pain Anticipation and Perception. And it was published in 2009. What's interesting about that is Jones was speaking to Ben Goldacre in 2008, presumably about data he had yet to publish. Regardless, the researchers put participants into an MRI scanner and shot lasers at their arms.
Nice.
Which sounds like an add-on I should consider for my homebrew laser quest.
Yes.
Although we'd probably have more players in the Homebrew Laser Quest because this study had 11 participants.
Wow.
11
that isn't good, is it?
Participants.
I mean, they had 2 arms, so that's 22. It was a multi-arm study in the sense that each person had multiple arms.
It was a single-arm study in the sense that everyone was right-handed.
If you do studies on animals, you have to prove that you're using enough animals in order to get a statistically significant finding so that you're not wasting the animals that you're using.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do that for humans.
Not animals, are they?
All you're doing is wasting people's time, not wasting people.
Wasting people's arms.
So the laser was tuned to the pain threshold of the participants. So they did this by giving...
That's quite useful, though.
They gave the participants a 10-point pain scale, where 0 says no sensation at all, 4 is just painful, just on the cusp of painful, and 10 is the worst pain imaginable. And that leaves 1, 2, and 3 as places where the participant can say, I can feel a laser, but it doesn't hurt. So
I worry about the scales that say 10 is the worst pain imaginable, because that's very different for a lot of people.
Different for different people. Although in this case,
some people have terrible imaginations.
It also depends on your imagination.
Yeah. If you ask Nicola at any point how much pain she's in, it's always like a 7, 8, or a 10. There's never a point. Nicola's someone who will bang her elbow on something, and you go, ow, and you go like, are you all right? And she go, no. And there's never been a point where I've asked Nicola, are you all right? And she's gone, yeah, it's fine. It's just bumped my elbow. It's always like, no, and everything. Are you fine? No, I'm not fine. No, it's terrible.
So they tuned the laser to the pain threshold of the participants. They did this by shooting a laser at their skin and then dialing it up until the participant said that's about a 3.
Right.
So just below the pain threshold.
At that point, they shot it in their eyes. Bam!
They then dialed it up and up and up until the participant reported a 7. So moderately painful. And they did that for each of
normal for me.
They did that for each of the participants, and then they averaged the laser power settings. So they finished up with standard painful laser, not painful laser. So they've got a standard setting that they can fire a laser that will hurt or a laser that will not.
Yes, and so it's good that they've... they've individualized that to people. They've calibrated to everybody's individual pain threshold.
But then not use the individual.
And then average that down.
Well, then they averaged it out. At least that's my reading of the paper is to say they averaged it out. But
why? They've only got 11 people. It's not that hard to personalise it for each person.
The power settings were like plus or minus a joule for each person anyway, so everyone was kind of in the same area. In the same
that's fine.
So maybe it was we were expecting to individualise it, but actually they were so close that we just...
It wasn't.
It'd be amazing if there was one super wuss who, for everyone else, a 2, that was like their 8. They're like, get it off me, get it off me.
So if you're with me so far, they have a laser calibrated so it can fire a painful beam or a not painful beam as needed.
Yes.
So what they did then was they took the right arm of each participant and fired 15 shots of pain at their arm.
Bam! Did that right arm have to be held aloft?
No, it had to be held fucking down because they were in MRI while they did it.
Right, gotcha.
So they had to stay really still.
They then applied a sham topical anaesthetic cream. So it was just an aqueous cream. It actually had no anaesthetic at all.
Oh, it came on a little packet saying sham, like it was the brand name. Because it had a shiny packet that it would have been more effective.
Then what they did was they fired another 15 shots, but this time dialed it back to 3. Didn't tell the participants that's what they were doing. So they used the not painful laser setting to convince the participants that the cream had worked. Because suddenly they rubbed cream on the arm and now the laser doesn't hurt.
And they thought, well, I'm glad that we established what was pain and what was not pain when the laser was on earlier. And I'm glad we're now only using the pain one and not the bit that we established was not pain. Because I'm sure that's the nurse not going to... They just got that, but it's never going to come up. I assume it's never going to come up in the experiment.
So then what they did is they fired another 15 shots of pain and then asked the participants to rate that on a 10-point scale. How painful was it? So you were given 15 shots of painful, 15 shots of sham painful after you'd had some cream, and then 15 shots of real painful after you'd had some cream, but after you were convinced that the cream was working.
Did the people know that it was binary?
No, they did not tell the participants that they were using the not painful setting. The not painful setting was there to trick you into thinking the anaesthetic
I get
worked.
that, but I mean, did they know that there was one or the other, that it was either pain or not pain, that there was nothing in between?
As far as the participants were concerned, all the laser bolts were the same.
Okay.
So a week later, the participants all came back and they did the whole shooting match again. Except this time, they told the participants it was a fake cream. And in fact, they were getting the same fake cream both times, but they didn't tell the participants that.
Did they also then say, you mugs? Look at your face. We had you. Beatles about. Get Jeremy out.
So first time they said, this is a new topical anaesthetic that we're trying out. Second time they give them the same stuff, but said, this is just a fake cream. Otherwise they did the same thing. So painful laser, rub the cream on. Not painful laser, oh look, the cream worked. And then painful laser, how bad was that? Write it down on a scale of 1 to 10.
Do they have to rate each of the 15 bursts?
No, it's in a block. So you got block 1, cream, block 2, block 3, and you rate block 1, block 2, and block 3. So it turns out that perhaps unsurprisingly, when you fire painful lasers at people, they say that it hurts. When you fire not painful lasers at people, they said that it didn't hurt. And when you fired painful lasers at them but told them that they'd been given an anaesthetic, they said it hurt, but not as much as before.
What happened when you didn't fire lasers at them?
They were fine.
Yeah, okay, good. Just, I mean, it's important to get all the possibilities out there.
But that's not entirely a surprising result, given how prone to biased self-reported outcomes are. So far, there's nothing here that's earth-shattering. But they did this while they were in an fMRI. So what does the fMRI data tell us? Does this say that there was a real reduction in pain, or whether the patients were experiencing the same pain before but just reporting they were in less pain? I'm not someone who has the faintest idea how to read an MRI, so I have to rely on the way the authors describe what they did and how they interpret those results. But their conclusion was, our results suggest that the main effect of placebo arises from the reduction of the anticipation of pain during placebo conditioning and is subsequently maintained during placebo analgesia. So these data suggest that the reduction in reported pain levels is a result of the participants feeling less anxious about the pain that was forthcoming because they thought their arm was covered in anaesthetic. Whether it was or wasn't really the point. The point is they were less anxious about the pain, which means even if the experience was exactly the same, it doesn't seem as bad because the worry was no longer there.
It's the doctor distracting you before he puts the needle in your arm.
Yeah. And that's not really a surprise, given that we know the experience of pain is modified by your stress and anxiety levels. It turns out that placebos can modify your experience by modifying your experience.
Yes, yeah.
They make you experience less anxiety, and therefore you experience less. It's not necessarily a surprise there. If you can convince somebody that something will hurt less, there is a good reason to think that they will experience less pain even with the same stimulus.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how clinically relevant the effect they've measured here is, however, because we're talking about a mean pain score of 4.26 plus or minus 1.03 standard deviation. After the participants were given the fake cream and told it was fake cream, and a mean pain score of 3.77 plus or minus 1.23 after the participants were given a fake cream and told it was anesthetic.
So less than a 1.
So it is within the standard deviation.
But isn't this exactly what we were saying about how if your pain is 3.6 and you're told that you've got something that will make your pain less, then you report it as a 3 because you kind of round down rather than, and if you're expecting you round up.
Yeah.
This could be a rounding thing as much as anything else as well.
But also, I mean, so these are the reported pain scores, which are not terrifically different between you're having a fake cream and you're having a real anesthetic. There's a difference of about 0.5 between them on that pain scale. But those are the reported values which will have bias in them. But even with bias in them, the difference between them is 0.5. It's tiny. So all the fMRI stuff is saying that we think the placebo effect here, the reduction, this 0.5 reduction, came from the fact that they were less worried about it hurting. Which, okay, we can reduce the anxiety of patients, and that results in a 0.5 reduction, which is within the standard deviation. And they don't give a p-value for that comparison of the pain score after fake cream and pain score after fake cream that you've been told is real anesthetic, which, to be honest, is the interesting statistical comparison to me in that study. Is what's the
chances legit?
Is that significant between those two things? So they don't give a p-value for that comparison. It's not a huge distance. It is within half a standard deviation. And to reiterate, this is a study done on 11 people. So, unfortunately, I once again find myself completely unimpressed. Maybe one day I will find something in placebo research that suggests it remotely deserves the reputation it has as a powerful clinical effect. Maybe one day I'll find something compelling, but listeners should tune in next time for more tales of the placebo myth. So we don't have time to do listener questions because we've had far too much to say.
We have.
So we don't have time for listener questions, but we do want your listener questions. So if you have a question for us, please send it to podcast@merseyside-skeptics.org.uk, or you can send it to us on Twitter, you send it to us on our Facebook, but the best place really is podcast@merseyside-skeptics.org.uk.
And that's a question. That's not you saying, can I have a special listener shout out? We're not going to have that, Annika. Not going to do that. That's not something we're going to do, so we're not going to get into that. No, we want a question we can answer, ideally, a question we can discuss. If it's I saw this picture of a thing, what do you think of it? We could probably do that. But if it's I saw this picture of a thing, could you give me an in-depth analysis based on your expertise? Then we probably need to do that.
Label it as a show suggestion.
Less likely to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But okay. So Skeptics in the Pub. We've got Liverpool Skeptics in the Pub is this Thursday. So tonight. In our regular venue, which is Dr. Duncan's, down by St John's Gardens. So if you're in the Liverpool area, you should come along to that. We'll be having our board meeting first.
Which you can come along to if you like.
You can come along to a line earwig to the shit we get to talk about. But that's
hear us plan the Christmas party
from again
probably
from 8:00 in Dr. Duncan. So come along to that if you're in the Liverpool area. That's going to be a fantastic time. We also have in 2 weeks' time, so it'll be the day the next show goes out.
Yes.
We've got our April talk, which is...
an April all sorts.
Is it April all sorts? We went April allotment.
We went for... Not an April allotment. It's not an April allotment.
April allusions.
April allusion.
I can't think of anything. But April all sorts. So that's going to be a series of mini talks delivered by people that we think are going to have interesting things to say. Are you going to do one? I might, if I get time, I might do 15 minutes on the placebo effect because I don't know that I've got anything interesting to say on that topic, but I might be able to dig out something.
Alice, you going to do one?
Yeah, I think so.
Good. I'm not.
15-minute version of your thesis?
Yeah,
Just gonna rattle through that.
That's a Pub HD talk.
I think we've got several other people already lined up to it, so it should be a good night. Some of our good regular people doing good talks and stuff.
Yeah, but we'll give that a plug in the next show. But that's going to be in our regular venue for our talks, which is the Vines.
The Vines
on Lime Street from 7:30. That's going to be 7:30. That one. Aside from that, then I think that is all we have time for.
I think so.
All that remains then is for me to thank Marsh for coming along today.
Thank you.
And thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
We have been Skeptics with a K, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.